it's Coach MK. And before we begin, let me say, if you don't feel loved by now, it's because you don't want to. I don't draw, y'all. This took forever, and it really stressed me out. So I want some appreciation for learning how to draw something that kind of looks like a switch. Yay! Because exactly what I want to talk about right now is the switches, the levers that I refer to. When I say there are levers we can pull as a coach, and you got to know which one to pull next and which ones don't need to be pulled yet. Well, while we wait on visuals to come our way that will highlight this a little bit further, I want to talk through the concept not only so that the person who is doing that work for me, my wayfinder, has an idea what the F I'm talking about, since so much lives in my messy brain and never makes it to the paper. More of it gets out when I speak than when I write. And her ADHD rivals mine, so we're an amazing pair. Get your Concerta and your Adderall, and let's get cracking on levers. So there are 4 levers. So you'll often hear 3. I believe that there is a 4th that we just don't like to talk about. I don't know why it's overlooked, but because you haven't heard of it, I can't convince anyone it's important. So the 4 levers that we pull in training, you might have guessed, what's the first one? If we're going from a walking plan to a run plan, right? What are the gradations of change? First, well, not necessarily first, second, third, and fourth. We'll just talk about the levers. The differences you might have noticed is the duration of the run part gets longer, or the duration, total workout time will increase. You go from a 45-minute workout to a 60-minute workout. Yeah. Or in the case of like a run walk, 3-to-1 walking to running, you can then go 3-2, increasing the running a little bit. So that's the first one. The next one is, get a different color for that. Second one is intensity, right? So instead of hitting 10K pace, we go for 5K pace or hang out at 8K pace. And all of those little shades of gray matter. The difference between 5K and 10K pace is huge and serves very different purposes physiologically. I would postulate you don't really need to spin out about that. Just this is one of those times, find someone you trust, hand out your training over to them, let them take the lead, and don't stress out about like, what do I really need right now? What's going to be the best? Like, you know, sometimes it just does. Sometimes it really matters. Sometimes it really doesn't. So rather than like more is better and faster is better because it isn't, less or slower, and slower is bad and I don't want to be bad, which is the mindset most people come to me with. Whether or not I like it, trying to change it is very difficult. Things are the way they are because they were the way they were, not because they're the way I want them to be. So we've got duration, we've got intensity. So we can go harder, we can go longer. And the next 2, I would argue, are the same thing, and you'll see where I'm going with this in a minute. Don't get too confused. This will all make sense if you train with me ever. It's duration and intensity. Oh, Coach MK, you need your Adderall. You just said the same thing twice. No, not really, because this is feeding into 2 different places. So there are 4 individual switches that we can pull. Duration, intensity of what? Yay! So repetition. Yay! Right, so here's what I'm talking about. So in a workout, for example, 1K repeats, right? You will have, so the rep portion if 1K repeats is the workout, right, you're going to have a warm up and a cool down, and in between you might have 5 sets we'll say you'll have 5 sets of 1 kilometer repeats at 5K pace, followed by active recovery. So The repetition in this case is the hard portion of the workout, the intensity. And that's, in this particular example, that's the 1 kilometer repeat. The interval, and this is generally, I'm calling it rest here so you know what I'm talking about, but when we do interval training, everyone seems to think that this is the interval. It is not. It's called, this is the interval, the recovery interval. Yep, this is the repetition. We call it rest, and I'm hoping that in this today, now that you know, we've got the repetition portion and the recovery interval. So interval training, it is all about the recovery. It's not about how long the repetition is or how intense it is, because that's all about specificity. This is what we fine tune to make the workout specific to the distance you're training for, or we just try to make it fun to keep you coming back doing it month after month. If you're not fit enough to really worry about specificity, and quite frankly, if you're not an elite runner, you don't need it. And I know that's kind of, it can feel, people hear that and they feel shocked or their feelings are hurt. I'm not calling you fat. I'm just saying, like, hey, when I ran that 3:42 in Philadelphia, I was not fit enough to have to worry about even doing marathon specific workouts. If you paid attention to my Strava back then, I wasn't doing very many marathon specific workouts. She was just trying to get my fitness back to where it had been before. Mind blown, true story, right? If I have a 5K coming up, I'm probably not doing 5K repeats. Why? I don't need that kind of specificity. I just need to get fitter. I need to be on my feet more. I need to be more adapted to the event, to doing road running. I need to be as cardiovascularly fit as I can, but we do that before we worry about the specificity. But that is not what people do. We live in a world where demand is, I want the most specific plan, and since that's how the purchasing decision is made, everything that's out there caters to that. I want a 5K plan that has the best of the best, most specific 5K repeats or 5K workouts that I can find. And coaches will even argue about this. Like, no one needs 5K repeats on a marathon plan. I'm like, well, you know what? Some people who just need to up their fitness level might. Some people who really need to learn 5K effort in their new body might benefit. Like, there are all kinds of reasons that have nothing to do with the distance or specificity. It might have to do with the client and the lesson the client needs to acquire before they get to the race of their target. It's not always about the science behind the repetition. There's psychology too, and the psychology really matters. It matters more, and I would argue, and someone who is not there to win than someone who is. And there's a really great article in Competitor right now. I'm going to find it and post a link in the comments. I read it yesterday, and I can't remember his name because I didn't think it mattered until this came out of my mouth right now. He was being very open about his finances, and he won a race. Now, we don't know anything about appearance fees or performance bonuses because all of that is still kept very secret pretty much consistently through track and field, not just the marathon world. But he said, well, we know what the winner gets. And we know what the bonus is if they set a course record or a world record at a given race. So if Des, for example, when she ran Boston, if she had set a course record and a world record, could have tripled the money potentially that she took home from her sponsor based off what she did that day. So there are all kinds of performance metrics baked into the plan or baked into their contracts that, what do they incentivize? I don't know. I mean, I could go there all day long, but there's a reason Des says that she trusts the marathon majors more than the Olympics. Ending on that, this guy in this article said he placed off podium in a race at the Pan Am Games, and it was a $35,000 hit, which was about a 30% hit in the money he was going to take home for the year. So it's always a devastating loss. Think about that. Like, you're losing a third of your yearly salary because the air was thick and you couldn't breathe good, or it was hotter than you expected and the crowd showed up faster, or there were 3 people there who were doping. And you're pretty sure of it because they got a whole lot faster and had a really good day when no one else did. this is why doping matters and this is why we care. But the reason I'm bringing it up here is that we don't have to deal with any of this. And if we don't have to deal with those types of problems, then we don't have to deal with the type of specificity required in the workouts either. More stress does not lead to better outcomes. More consistency always does. So when we think about the levers that are available that we can pull, the biggest one is the consistency lever. Because if you've got this really specific workout plan that does not take your psychology or where you are in your fitness journey or your specific needs into account, and it's based all around the finish time or the distance itself, I'd argue that's one you're probably not going to be able to complete, because you're going to pick one that has the where you want to be, the aspirational over the actual. Whereas you could show up here, join, maintain, just do the work and stay here. And if you do 75% of the work 90% of the time, that's a lot of leeway, man. That's like sleeping in every other Tuesday or Thursday every week, which I'm not giving you permission to do. I'm just saying, realistically, it's not about doing everything perfectly perfect to get the benefits. It's about having the net consistency over a long period of time. When I asked her about, in the most recent podcast, Tube of Toothpaste, where I said, talk to me about, when was your last race? And she's like, oh God, Twin Cities 2016, blah, blah, blah. And I was 2017, and just went on and on and on and on and on about the race. She clearly missed the point that I was trying to get at, because I knew she would, because she gets defensive, just like the rest of us. We get defensive and we get nervous, and because we were all about the race, and what we wanted that race to be didn't happen. But if we're not losing a third of our yearly salary, who cares? I digress. Where I was getting at was like, we've been talking about consistency in running, and I'm like, Sarah, you have been consistent for 2 years. You've been consistent since Twin Cities, which was my initial question, and you went off on this tangent worried about the race. It was never about the race. It's about the consistency you've had since that race. That is what's going to define the next race, and that is what's going to define next year. And when you start looking at it that way, it's not about the workouts I missed on this limited short-term training plan, but about the levers about the levers that I'm pulling realistically. It's not about the plan. It's about my ability to stay consistent and be supported until I'm ready and in a place where I want to pull all the levers and do all the things again. That's where the magic happens. Accidentally 2 years passed without Coach Sarah thinking once about it or giving herself credit for it. So if Dr. Coach Sarah of Harvard University isn't yet thinking the way I want y'all to think, what have you not been giving yourself credit for all this time? Maintain's been open since April for the beta testers, so that means we've got about 30 people at least that have been here consistently since April. Have you paid attention to that? Have you been giving yourself credit for that? Have you been looking back and saying, hey, even with nothing on the calendar and no races, I have done this. I don't care if you race now or ever, but when you do, I want that race to work for you, and I never want you to lose sight of the work that we're doing because you're focused on the levers that we aren't yet pulling. I promise you, working harder is not the same as working smarter. And if you're here doing what I ask you to do, it's the smartest work you could possibly do. Wayfinder, we need to bake this in somehow to whatever it is that we do next. Because the follow-up to this will be talking about the magic of the interval and why the interval matters so freaking much. Yay! You're coached. You're loved. Excuse me for leaving you hanging on for a bit, but you're winning at life. Next time I'm going to come back, we're going to talk not just about the recovery intervals, we're going to talk about what the levers look like, what these switches look like, because some of them, it's not a binary on and off. It's like the one I have over here on the wall. It's a slide. It's a nice little sliding switch. Yay! That my children like to turn on and off. But I can woo, woo, ah. Once on off there, and there's a whole bunch of shades of light, and there's a whole bunch of shades of hard, either hard work or hard recovery. We're going to talk about what an aggressive nap and hard recovery looks like when we return soon.